and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Lulu, founder of Bots Gardens. And the reason that we're here today is because, as you know, I've been renovating this property in Notting Hill, and I felt that the reception space really needed a little bit of life and a little bit of foliage, and I wanted to reflect the kind of verdure tapestry that we've got on the wall with these two olive trees, which I think are so beautiful now that they're in situ. But before we kind of delve into that a little bit deeper, first I obviously want to introduce Lulu. Lulu, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So I just think they look so fantastic. I actually cannot get over how good they look. The pots, the height, everything, and it really just adds an element of like depth and texture to the space. So I'm super happy with them.
Good,
Thank you.
I'm pleased.
But do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about how you came to found Bots Gardens?
Yes. So I founded Bots Gardens probably about 3 years ago, and we work on garden design, installation, anything really to do with gardens. So we'd supply just pots, plants, potted plants, and work on any scale. So from tiny little roof terraces all the way to massive garden designs in the country. And yeah, I just have always loved gardens, but mostly loved design, and used to work in interior design, and then moved that passion to the gardens and kind of went from there.
So having worked in interior design first, what was the initial kind of spark that inspired you to take your learnings from interior design and then apply that to gardening and landscape design?
I suppose I loved the design aspect of it, and I've always loved interiors and I always will. But at the time, because I studied about 7 years ago, there was a little bit of a missing gap, I thought, in the market of people who love gardens but don't really know how to approach it. And there's either really high-end garden design, or you're going to B&Q and kind of have used my knowledge and design to fill that gap and create beautiful gardens.
I think it's so interesting actually, because you're right. And one of the things that I really notice in real estate is when I'm advising clients, well, first of all, the number one thing that everybody asks for, especially since COVID, I think it had a huge impact, but everybody wants outside space, even if that is a little Juliet balcony or a roof terrace, or, you know, a massive garden. Obviously that's harder to find in London, but specifically in London, I think outside space is something that's really treasured, and it can really transform the look and feel of a property and also a property's value. So it's interesting to think of it both from the seller's side, if you're presenting a property, what you can do with the outside space to really make the place kind of pop. But also definitely I advise my clients to think about the garden from day one as part of the whole scheme and incorporate it into, you know, their whole design plan along with the interiors. Is that something that you find, like, where do you tend to kind of come into the picture with clients? If it's like a new project, at what point do you sort of get involved?
I suppose the earlier the better. We always say, you know, most people come to us right at the end, but it's always better to come right at the beginning, because then we can advise on, you know, sort of just fittings, where you're putting everything, where you're fitting your tap. But also, if it is too late, well, it is never too late. We do lots right at the end, and we'll come in and dress spaces rather than change the actual landscape, which, you know, works really well too, but the sooner the better, really.
No, for sure. And then you mentioned you kind of do a whole range of things, from obviously our two olive trees here behind us to much larger gardens and country gardens as well. Do you have a favourite project that you've worked on that you can tell us about?
Oh, okay, favourite type. I think I do love doing small little installs like this, because you see the impact straight away, rather than working on a design and it's years and years in advance. I suppose I'm a little bit impatient like that. So, and we also do lots of restaurants and hotels where we just go in and dress spaces, and it transforms it so quickly. And I think seeing that transformation, I just really love. Favourite project, we did one round the corner in Notting Hill, and it's a roof terrace, and the clients were amazing. It was an Australian couple, and they were just so lovely. They were really creative, kind of gave us their vision, but said just get on with it. And so we did. We went and dressed the whole terraces. There were 2 terraces, and yeah, it looks amazing. And I do sometimes think if the clients let you just go and use your vision, it always works out really well.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a really nice thing when a client just kind of trusts you completely and lets you get on with it and goes with your vision. Or as you said, they kind of give you guidance on like, oh, we like this or we like that, but then allows you to kind of creatively interpret that. That's a really fun kind of project to work on, I can imagine.
And I suppose because with garden design there's so many elements, like the light levels, the the heat, the atmosphere you're in, it's good to be guided. But like you were saying here, oh, I really like olives, but I don't know if I prefer black olives. But it's good to then, we can advise on the best ones for the room or for the garden.
No, I have to say as well, I think with garden design and landscaping, and also like, plants and interior spaces. So just as a bit of context, as I said, I really wanted to bring some greenery and some foliage into the space. And because of the kind of classical features of the property, I had this idea that I really wanted olive trees. But I know that, or I kind of had a hunch that maybe olive trees weren't the best thing for an interior, and specifically black olive trees, which I had seen on Architectural Digest and Instagram like a million times. But it was really helpful to have your advice and input on not only kind of, which would be the best type of plant, but where they should specifically be positioned within the room, and that kind of technical knowledge and expertise that you bring, which I think probably most people, especially in London, kind of lack, which is fine, but that's where your service is super valuable. How has your knowledge developed, I guess, over the years? And you said you studied 7 years ago and then have kind of been working it since then. Like, what's the process been like?
So I studied at KLC, where you do learn a lot of the plants, and I remember finding it so daunting because there are so many plants and they've all got Latin names, and it really confused me. But over the time, I've learned it and picked it up, and just researching. And also I think you develop a sort of style. So there's plants that you always use. So say in a garden, I do love using Pittosporum just because it's got a really lovely glossy leaf, but it's also quite low maintenance. And then there are so many types of Pittosporum. So it is really tricky, and still I find myself learning new plants. But I do think over time you pick it up and just I try not to be daunted by it.
So if we were speaking to somebody who, say, they wanted to transform a space, whether that's an interior or an exterior, I'll leave that up to you, what would be your kind of key piece of advice or takeaway in terms of where they should start, other than obviously reaching out for your help and guiding them through that process? But is there a top tip that you would give somebody when they're thinking about landscaping or design?
Oh, I suppose there's so many elements to it. So it's the layout, you've got to get that right. And I think in a garden, not overcomplicating it. And then also materials. I think, again, we usually try limit materials probably to 3. So maybe you've got a brick, a really nice Portland stone or something like that. And then maybe you bring in terracotta pots. So it all flows together. And I think that's the same internally. You've got to really work with the space rather than have these preconceived ideas in your head. Think what will work with that. Because I suppose like with these pots, it's such a beautiful earthy interiors. So then trying to bring in that sort of vibe to the planting and the pots.
And would you say that's something that you've kind of brought across from your interior design background as well? Because I think that's something that you definitely think about with interiors is like, right, how many kind of colours or textures? Let's not have millions of different things going on. Let's make sure it's a little bit of a conversation and that it all kind of ties in together. And it's interesting how you can apply that same logic to planting and design as well for landscaping.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that's my favourite part of it, kind of choosing out, doing the pot layout plans, doing the plant layout plans, and getting it all to tie with the interior scheme. I think I do love working on interior schemes, which lots of garden designers don't really like it because, I suppose naturally plants shouldn't be inside. But
Sorry,
no, but I love it because also it's bringing the outside in, linking the plants and the materials to the space, and it completely transforms the space.
No, 100%. I think it has such an impact, and it's such a simple thing that you can do to transform any space.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you just touched on something quite interesting, is when you spoke about the different kinds of materials that you use in a landscape design.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we think of landscaping, I think a lot of people jump straight to the foliage and straight to the plants, but there's so much more to it. So in terms of the service that you provide and the kind of design package, let's say, can you talk to us a little bit about sort of, does that include like outbuildings? Obviously you mentioned layouts, kind of what types of things could people think about incorporating into?
Yes, so I suppose we break it down into stages. So there's the concept design, where we're just working on the layout of the garden, and we might go through a few revisions, and sometimes we'll present a few options depending on the client. Some people don't like having options, and then the master plan, so we'll finalise the plan of the garden, and that's still very much on plan. But then we're going to develop design, so that's working on lighting plans, material plans, hard landscaping plans, irrigation, and more the technical side of it. And then we will look at, drainage plans and the more boring things like that.
Boring, but very important.
Exactly. And, that is probably my least favourite part of it, those sort of bits. But, you do need to do it. But, saying that, we do full designs like that, or we do small little tiny installs like this, which I think I do prefer.
Good. That's always good to have your niche and your thing that you definitely love and can just throw yourself into and apply yourself to. So one of the things I also wanted to ask you is Chelsea Flower Show. Obviously a huge thing in London. A lot of people go every year. I presume that you've been before?
Yes, I try to go every year.
Okay, fantastic. And in terms of landscape and garden design, I should imagine it's a fantastic place to find inspiration. Is that something that you've found for your work? And if so, what do you think is the most inspiring or innovative thing that you've seen at Chelsea Flower Show?
Oh, I suppose the planting palettes are always so inspiring, because I think people try and push the boundaries a little bit. So it's always quite interesting to see the combinations and the plants. But I think last year they did a section on balcony gardens, and it was really interesting because they gave everybody a limited space, and then they all had to transform it. And the things people did, to use the space and make this tiny little space feel so much bigger was, I thought, quite inspiring.
And if you were to have a display at Chelsea Flower Show and you could do your dream display, do you have any ideas of what you would want to show?
Oh, I suppose it's something I've never thought about, because I do think somewhere like Chelsea Flower Show, it is actually really hard to get into. You have to go through all these applications, especially for a main avenue garden. So maybe something small, like one of the little balcony gardens, and just use it as an example that, is really achievable to create an amazing space with a tiny space.
Well, I'm super excited to see your display at Chelsea Flower Show one day. I know it's going to happen and I cannot wait. Thank you so much for sitting down and having this chat with me. I've really appreciated it. I am obsessed with my olive trees, so I'm going to take very good care of them. But I've really enjoyed this chat. And I wanted to ask you, for everybody watching, where they can find you.
Yes, well, firstly, thank you for having me. And I'm so glad you love your olive trees. To find me on Instagram, it's Bots Gardens, and then website is www.botsgardens.co.uk.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and found it insightful. I know that I have. And if you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and I promise there'll be lots more exciting design and property content coming very soon. Bye for now.